consider Spark as an alternative to Hadoop? I mean, there have been articles out there that Spark is taking over from Hadoop and so on.
Sure.
What's your view on that?
Well, that's interesting, because when I hear that question sometimes, you're not sure if there's a real understanding of what Spark is and of course its role within even the Hadoop ecosystem. So Spark, in my perspective, is not a replacement for Hadoop, but it is a better and more efficient way to do analytics on top of data, on top of HDFS, for example, than MapReduce. So because of its characteristics, because of, from an in-memory perspective, and some of the other capabilities around streaming and other things, it's definitely going to supplant MapReduce in the near term. And I believe very shortly, within a year or so, you won't see anyone, especially writing new applications with MapReduce. I think there'll still be a lot of it out there. So if you've had efforts where you've implemented Apache Hadoop for your analytics and you've already done things that are working and that are efficient enough, then I think those will stay around. They'll be the legacy system of open source.
Yes.
But for those that are looking for the speed advantage, the machine learning capabilities, the ability to do graph databases, those types of things, looking for those types of capabilities definitely Spark will be better than MapReduce. But Hadoop is not going away. HDFS is an excellent way to store structured, unstructured data, and I don't see any of that changing at all, just based on, in fact, I think Spark in itself is going to make Hadoop even more important overall than what it was before.
How much would you say that modern companies are thinking in terms of open source? How much is open source on their mind?
If you look at the statistics, and I've seen a number of different ones on this, more than, I think, 90% of companies have some type of open source within their IT infrastructure. And in fact, it's probably maybe even more than that now. So I think if you look 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was maybe a bit of a reluctance from an open source perspective. But if you look at what open source actually does, it's about the community that is around these capabilities and these projects. So the important thing is with these communities, and obviously technicians at companies being involved with these communities, there's much more of a readily acceptance of open source. There's practically not anything that you want to do within your IT infrastructure that there isn't some type of open source technology available to perform those functions. And even at IBM, I mean, we've not only just embraced open source from a legacy Linux perspective or a Spark perspective, but there are other things that we're coming up with. Like, for example, we launched Quirks a few weeks ago as an open source foundation project, and that is actually a part of our streaming analytics technologies.
As a sales leader, would you say that open source has changed the way companies evaluate the products that are being offered to them?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think most companies now have a mantra of, we're going to evaluate open source first. So there's a definite advantage from an agility perspective. There's definitely an advantage from an economics perspective. So if you look at open source not being tied down with the high cost of enterprise software and the maintenance required for those types of endeavors, but also from a capability perspective. So if you even look at what we can do with Spark today in analytics, or things we couldn't have even thought of doing 5-10 years ago. In fact, mostly we would see even limitations on what was possible. So the art of the possible is changing purely because of open source.
How long do you think the success of Spark will be around?
Oh, I think the future of Spark is very bright. I mean, if you look Spark streaming, the improvements that are going to be coming through with machine learning, I think are really key things that are going to even drive further Spark adoption.
Do you think there's a limit to the usability of Spark as a solution?
Really, there are no limitations, and that's what's the great thing about open source. There's no barrier to entry from a capital costs or even a development perspective. Open source in Spark, it's all about the community. and there's really no barrier to entry whatsoever.
What would you say are the determining factors for companies to choose solution like Spark?
One thing that is often overlooked is the simplicity and the ability to iterate and the ability to do something quickly and efficiently. It doesn't take a 1 or 2 year data warehousing effort to pull my data in and to make sense of my data and to be able to apply analytics against that data. I can do it very quickly. And if I even want to take advantage of something like Scala, I may be able to write 40 lines of code instead of 400.
Yes.
So I think it's great from a feature set perspective, but I think sometimes we forget it's about the simplicity. And when you're integrating Spark technologies into your business, sometimes those are the biggest challenges.
Right.
And as I talk to business users or across all my travels and all my dealings with customers, their biggest problem set is not about the technology or finding the right resources to deal with the technology. It's about how do I integrate that into my business. So simplicity, responsiveness, ability to iterate are really key to making that a much easier transition for the business community to take advantage of Spark.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Cheers.